Hi everyone, welcome back to Kids for Code. Today in Java Advanced, we are going to be learning about array methods and manipulation. First, let's review the summary questions from last class. Number 1, why do we use arrays? Well, we use arrays because they allow us to group variables of the same type together into one variable. Number 2, how do we initialize an array of size 3 that holds doubles? So if we remember from last class, to initialize an array, we first have to write the type, which in this case is double, and then square brackets to indicate that we're going to be making an array, and then the name of the array, which is my array. And then we write equals new double and then bracket 3 because we want a size of 3. Number 3, how do we tell Java what parameters we need in a function? So we do this by putting the parameters types and names in the parentheses when we create a function. So in this example, we have two parameters. The first parameter is type int with the name of first param, and the second parameter is type Boolean with the name of second param. Number 4, how do we tell Java what type a function will return? So we do this by putting the type after static but before the name of the function. So in this example, we have static and then type double, which will be the return type, and then the name of the function, which is example. Number 5, how do we tell Java what data we want to return? So we do this by putting the data to return after the return keyword. So in this example, inside the curly brackets, we have the return keyword, and it's returning the double 1.2. Number 6, how do we write a function that returns a Boolean, takes an integer and double as parameters, and returns true if the integer plus the float equals 2.57? So first we need to make the function. So we write static and then the return type, which will be a Boolean, and then the name of the function, which in this case is checksum. And then since we have two parameters, one will be an integer and the other will be a double, we write parentheses int, the name of the parameter, which will be first, comma, double, and then the name of the second parameter, which will be second. And then we have curly brackets, and then inside the function we have a variable of type double, and it's called sum. And sum will basically hold the first parameter plus the second parameter. And then the function will have the return keyword, which will be returning true or false whether or not sum is equal to 2.57. And if we remember from before that the double equal sign basically asks Java if sum is equal to 2.57 or not. Now we are going to be learning about array manipulation. So when we're making an array, we may want to change the contents of the array. And to do so, you need to call the index of the array and use the equal sign to assign it to a value. So in the example, we have an array of type int called myArray. And in myArray, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So to manipulate myArray, we write the name of the array, myArray, and then square brackets, and then an index, which in this case will be 0. And then we assign the value in index 0 to another value, which will be 5 in this case. So once this is all done, myArray will be manipulated into 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Manually assigning a value to an index may be tedious, so you can also use for loops to manipulate an array. So in this example, we have myArray, which has ints 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we have a for loop, which starts at I equals 0, which will basically mean it'll go from index 0 and then goes until I is no longer less than 5, and then it'll add 1 for every iteration. And then in the curly brackets, we manipulate the array by saying myArray bracket I, which will basically, and then plus equals 1. So this will basically add 1 to every value in index I of my array. So after this for loop is done, my array will be 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we're going to do some array manipulation practice. So what does this code do to the contents of array? So we have array, which has ints 1, 2, and 3. So if we look inside the for loop, we see array.length. So .length is a array method that we can use to find the length of an array. And in this case, array has a length of 1, 2, 3. So in this for loop, it'll start from I equals 0, and then it'll go from until I is no longer less than array.length, which is 3, and then it'll add 1 to every iteration. And then inside the for loop, we have array, and then the index I minus minus. So what this will basically do is for every value in index I, it'll just subtract 1. So after this for loop is done, array will become 0, 1, 2. So we have more array manipulation practice. What are the contents of my array after executing the code? So we have the array, my array, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then now we have 2 for loops. You should note that the first for loop starts at int I equals 0, and the second one starts at int I equals 1. So let's first take a look at the first for loop. So the first for loop will start at 0, and it'll go until I is no longer less than 5. And then for every iteration, I will be added 2, will be plus 2. So this for loop will be only affecting indexes 0, 2, and 4, which in my array, the values are 1, 3, and 5. And then inside the for loop, we manipulate my array by having every value in index I multiplied by 2. So since this first for loop only affects indexes 0, 2, and 4, after this first for loop is finished, my array will be manipulated into 2, 2, 6, 4, 10. Note that even though the for loop does not affect indexes 1 and 3, they still remain there and they don't disappear. Okay, now let's look at the second for loop. Note that it starts at int I equals 1, and it adds 2 for every iteration, and it goes until I is no longer less than 5. So in this for loop, in the second for loop, it will be only affecting indexes 1 and index 3. And in the for loop, it will basically manipulate the array by having every value that every index I, it'll just assign the value in index I to 0. So since the second for loop only affects indexes 1 and 3, the numbers 2 and 4 will both become 0. So after both of these for loops are finished, my array will turn into 2, 0, 6, 0, 10. Now we're going to be looking at how to manipulate arrays with other data types. So if we go to Eclipse and we make a new Java project by pressing File, New, Java Project, and then naming it Array Manipulation Practice. And then we also need to create a class by clicking this green C button, and we can call it Array Manipulation Practice. Remember not to put any spaces or else Java will not allow it to work. Once we press finish, we need to write public static void main, and then string, capital S, square brackets, args, and then curly brackets. So we can also manipulate arrays that have types double, Boolean, and strings, and in this demo we'll be manipulating a Boolean type array. So we need to write the type, which was Boolean, square brackets to indicate that it's an array, and then the array name, we'll just call it my array, equals, and then we'll just assign the values to false, true, true. Note that Boolean only has two values, which is true and false. So to manipulate this array, we are going to make it so that false becomes true and then true becomes false. And to do this, we need to go through the whole array, so we need to use a for loop. And starting from I equals 0, index 0, and then we'll go until my array dot length. Remember, this returns the length of my array, which in this case is 1, 2, 3, and then add 1 for every iteration. So if you remember, the exclamation mark basically returns the opposite of every Boolean. So if we do exclamation mark false, this will basically return true. And we are going to be using the exclamation mark in this for loop. So we do my array, and then the value in index I. So, and then we'll assign it to the opposite using this exclamation mark, my array index I. So what this does is for every value in my array, it assigns it to the opposite of the value in the same index. So once this for loop is done, my array will become true, false, false. So now we are going to be looking at how to copy an array. And let's just use the same Boolean array here. So to copy an array, we need to make a new array of the same type with the same length. To do that, we'll do Boolean, which is the type, square brackets, and then we'll just name this copy, and then equals to. It has to be the same length as my array to copy it, so we do new Boolean my array dot length, which is 3, and then semicolon. Once this is done, we need to make it so that every the same value, the values in every index will translate into copy. So the values in each index will be the same, and we're going to make a for loop to do that. So int I equals 0 to start from the 0th index, and then I is less than my array dot length I plus plus. And then we need to write these curly brackets, and then we'll write copy I is equal to my array I. So what this basically does is, since it's calling the same index, it'll be assigning the value to the same index. So once this for loop is done, copy will be the same as array, and it'll be false, true, true. So now, once that's done, we're going to be learning about how to resize an array. So since Java does not let you change the length of an array once it's been initialized, we need to do it manually. And to do this, we also need to create a new array. And we're just going to be using this same array from before. So we need to write Boolean, and then the name will just be resize equals to, and then since it's going to be a different length, we'll just do new Boolean, and then we'll just add 1 to the length. So we'll do myArray.length and then plus 1. So resize will have a length of 4 instead of 3. And then now we're going to copy the contents in myArray to resize. So we do for int I equals 0, and then I is less than myArray.length I plus plus. So note that I do myArray.length instead of resize.length. This is because if you do resize.length, the for loop will be able to access I equals 3. And since there is no index 3 in my array, it'll come out as an exception. That's why we do myArray.length instead of resize.length. So now we do the same thing as before to copy myArray into resize. We do resize index I equals myArray index I. So once this is done, resize will become false, true, true, false. Note that the last index is false because the default value for booleans is false. And if we want to manipulate resize so that the last index is actually true, we can just do resize index 3 equals to true. So once this is done, resize will be false, true, true, true. And that's basically it. So now let's go to our summary questions. So summary question number 1, how can we manually manipulate an array? Number 2, what does nameOfArray.length do? Number 3, how would you make a copy of an array? So you guys can answer this on your own for now, and we'll go over these summary questions in our next class or video. And that will be it for today. See you later.